Hey guys, I'm so sorry that we weren't able to do our after school study session like we normally do. Things just didn't work out really good with logistics, just trying to get back from the protest thing. I ended up getting a migraine and feeling really bad. So I wasn't able to do it today. And then I told you guys that on Wednesday I had the Grow Your Own meeting at the board that had to be at 3:30. So we're not going to get to do a traditional after school study session like we always do. So what we'll do instead is I thought I'd just make this video. So I've got the test right in front of me on my computer. And so what I'm going to do is just go through the questions just like I normally would on a study session. And also at the end of the video, I will tell you what the bonus question is. So if you watch all the way up until the end, I will tell you what the bonus question is as well. Okay, so let's go through these questions if you want to review for the test. Okay, so one of the first questions talks about which conference talked about appeasement. And so I want you to think in your head, see if you can think of what the correct answer is before I give you the answer, see if you can name it. But so this is the conference that, as far as German aggression went, we try to do appeasement, but instead it just encouraged more aggression. And you should have been thinking it was the Munich conference. So there are three major conferences that happened during World War II. And all three of those are going to be on your test. So that's the first one, the Munich conference, okay? And I'll point them out as we get through them. All right, now what started World War II, you should be thinking in your head in 1939 was the invasion of Poland. Okay, well, when that happened, we changed our Neutrality Act in 1939. We said that we would allow any nation to buy arms from us as long as they did cash and carry. Okay, so that's the next question. You need to know cash, and they had to transport the materials by themselves, which is just basically cash and carry. What did the United States initially follow, or why did the United States initially follow a policy of appeasement toward Germany? It's because we were going through the Great Depression. We had our own economic problems, so we were trying to stay out of the war, and that's why we passed so many neutrality acts, because we want to stay out of the war. Okay. Next question asks about what speech did FDR give in 1941? And hopefully you're saying, oh, I know, Miss Watkins. It was the Four Freedoms speech. So the Four Freedoms speech, I remember it had the freedom of want, freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom of worship, and then freedom of speech. Should have been the four. Now, what was the whole purpose of this? And this is the most missed question on the test. One of the most missed. That speech was supposed to increase economic support for Great Britain. Okay, so that's what the Four Freedom speech is about. Not to get us involved, not to immediately declare war. It is to try to help us economically support Great Britain. Okay, how did America take a step towards war in 1941? That was when we passed the Lend-Lease Act. And remember, that's going to be the last thing before Pearl Harbor that really gets us close to war. And that's finally when we're saying, listen, take whatever you want to for the war. You can just pay us back after the war is over. That idea of if your house is burning down, we're not going to charge you right now. Okay, why did we adopt a Europe First strategy? This is the sixth question. Why do we adopt a Europe First strategy? And hopefully you're thinking in your head before I even say this answer. That is because Hitler is the greatest threat. Germany is the greater threat. So we've got our eyes on Germany, but we're saying the entire time, we're not forgetting about Japan. We're coming for you guys later. But Hitler is the greater threat. Then in this battle, this was where Hitler's plans of dominating Europe had ended. And so hopefully for this question, you're thinking it's the Battle of Stalingrad. That was the Soviet Union, where the Russian winner ends up helping them to fight Hitler, and Hitler realizes he can't take all of Europe. What did we learn at the Kasserine Pass and at the Battle of El Alamein, which both of those were in the North African campaign? So what were the two things that we learned there? We learned that we needed more aggressive officers, and we also learned that we needed to be better trained at desert fighting. So you should have known those two. Okay, next, during World War II, many African Americans fought in this type of campaign, and it's where they wanted a victory over segregation and a victory over Hitler. So you should have been thinking in your head, this is the Double V campaign. Is what a lot of African Americans are pushing for. Question number 10, how do population shifts change American life during the war? So it's asking, like, where are people moving to on the home front in the United States? And it's in the South in California, and it was called the Sun Belt. So that's where you're going to see a lot of the population move. The next question asks about FDR and how he created the OPA. So the Office of Price Administration or the Office of Price Production, either one of those. But on the test it says OPA. And so what were they supposed to do? They were supposed to stop inflation. Remember, they froze all of the rates, like all the prices, all the rents, everything is frozen at that price that happened in 1942. And it's to try to stop inflation. All right, question number 12 talks about our next conference. So remember, this is our second one. The first one we had talked about was Munich conference. Now on this one, it asked about the Tehran conference. And what do we learn at the Tehran conference? That was when we decided we're finally going to attack Germany and go into the Western Front in France. That's when we decided to do D-Day. So we're going to attack France. That way we can eventually get to Germany. Okay, that was the Tehran conference. Now, one of the effects of this battle was that German troops were destroyed by the American Air Forces, which led to their ultimate surrender to the Allies. It was Battle of the Bulge. Now, that's a most missed question, too. A lot of people don't realize that at the Battle of the Bulge, that the German troops were destroyed by our American Air Forces. Remember, the skies cleared, and so it was able for the bombers to come in and to that eventually leads to their surrender. That's the last stand that Germany has. And a lot of people mix that up. They don't look for the American Air Forces part of it. Okay, next question's asking about Japanese forces. So it says, as American forces approached Japan, Japanese forces, they refused to surrender. And so because they're refusing to surrender, we have to use ultimate force, which is the atomic bomb. Next question. So we're on question number 15. Hitler's economic persecution of Jews in Germany involved what? Now remember, in the beginning, he started with economic persecution, and that was where they boycotted the Jewish businesses. So they refused to hire Jewish workers, like in civil service jobs, those kind of things. Next question asks, what was Hitler's final solution? And that's genocide, completely destroying all the Jewish people that were in the Third Reich and their controlled areas. The next question asks, what was the largest Nazi death camp? It was located in Poland, in southern Poland, and is called Auschwitz. So make sure you know the name of that one. What campaign in the European theater was fought on a continent other than Europe? And that was North Africa. All the rest were in Europe, all except for the North African campaign. So that's like Kasserine Pass, El Alamein that we had talked about. Hey, these two battles were significant because they boosted morale in the United States. So they give hope to the American cause and bolster our morale, even though they're not significant wins for us. That is the Battle of Coral Sea and the Doolittle Raid. So remember, make sure that you remember both of those. Remember, we don't really accomplish much, but at least it boosts our morale. The next question asks, what describes the experience of Americans of Japanese descent during the Second World War? Remember, they were forced into internment camps on the West Coast, particularly in California. They're all put into that. The next question after that asks about what was one effect of the D-Day invasion. So remember, D-Day is where we attack France on those 5 beaches. And after we get into France, the plan is we're going to keep going on until we can get to Germany. So the answer to that one is saying that we took an important step towards reaching Germany, because that's our end game. We want to get to Germany. Okay, now the next question is which one of these is least like the other? So you got to pick the one that sticks out. So your choices are Zoot Suit Riots, the Office of Price Production, the Wax and Waves, or the War Production Board. And hopefully you're thinking the Zoot Suit Riots, because that dealt with a minority. All the rest of those are things that were in the war that helped the war cause. But the Zoot Suit Riots was actually a discrimination issue with the Latin American teenagers that wore the big baggy uniforms, and that was unpatriotic because you're supposed to ration your cloth. Next question, we're on number 23 now. So it says shortly after Adolf Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. So this is the beginning of World War II. So shortly after that happened, what ended up happening after the non-aggression pact? That was when Germany invaded Poland, and that's what starts World War II officially. Okay, the next question asks for you to put the following events in chronological order from the first thing that happened to the last thing. So there's VJ Day, VE Day, D-Day, and the invasion of Italy. Okay, so you should be thinking in your head, the invasion of Italy happens first. because we started with North Africa, then we go to Italy. After Italy is D-Day, because then we go to France. And then after D-Day would be VE Day, because victory over Europe, when we take over Germany. The last thing is VJ Day, because that's the Japanese. That happened in September 1945. It took the Japanese the longest to surrender. So that's going to be the end, is VJ Day. All right, we're almost finished with your multiple choice. So then it says, why did Stalin want Britain and the United States to open a second front in France? Remember, he had been asking that the whole entire time of the war. And he's wanting that so that Germany will divide its troops between two fronts. They won't all be focused on the Soviet Union. Half of them will have to go to France, and then the other half stays at the Soviet Union. So he's trying to help out his own country. It's kind of a selfish reason why he's wanting to open up a second front. But remember, he kept pushing for it the entire time. President Truman's chief priority in using the atomic bomb against Japan was what? It was to save American lives, because he's the American president and he felt like using that bomb would cause the least amount of American casualties, because if not, the war is going to drag on for forever. The next question asks about wartime pressures. How did it create a break from the past when it came to women? Remember, women are taking jobs that fall outside of the traditional realm of women. They're working in hard industrial jobs, and they were called Rosies. It's kind of their nickname. So make sure that you know that. The next question asks, whose decision was it to use the atomic bomb against Japan? And that was Harry S. Truman. Don't pick FDR. And hopefully you know why, because FDR had already passed away at that point. So it's Harry S. Truman who has to use the final decision to use the bomb. The next question is a chart. And the chart says the number of women working during World War II. And it keeps going up and up on the chart. Like each year, there's more and more women. And so we just want you to figure out between what 2 years was that they're the biggest increase. So all you have to do is just look and see which one has the biggest jump and pick between those 2 years. It's a really easy one, just to see if you can read a graph. And then the Battle of the Midway was a blank point in the war. It is a turning point. Remember, that is the most important naval battle. Because if the Japanese had taken Midway, then we would have had to move all of our defenses back to California. And that means that they had tried to attack the United States. They would already been at the United States before we could have stopped them. It would already be at California. Okay. All right. Next one. And these are terms that if I were you, I would know how to spell. Oink, oink. Okay. So this one says, this was a document that was created in 1941 that the United States didn't officially get into the war, but they did sign this with Great Britain, talking about goals for the war. That is the Atlantic Charter. Okay. It's kind of a hard one. A lot of people miss that one. We adopt this strategy when we're trying to take Okinawa and Iwo Jima. That is island hopping. It's our island hopping strategy. The big three included Joseph Stalin, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. So make sure you know who those three are. The famous African-American squadron that never lost a single bomber, they're called the Tuskegee Airmen. It's Tusk-E and then G-E-E. That's how you spell that. The next one, who were the Native Americans that served as code talkers during World War II? That is the Navajo. It looks like Navajo, but it's pronounced Navajo. But for spelling, think Navajo. After the fall of France in 1940, the country was split into two controlled areas. It is occupied France and Vichy France. Those are the two. Okay, so make sure you know that. This was where 75,000 American and Filipino troops were forced to make a 55-mile trek to prison camps. That is the Bataan Death March. Bataan is spelled Bataan, the Bataan Death March. Okay. This was the agreement between the United States and Mexico that permitted Mexican citizens to have short-term agricultural work permits. So this is like farming permits. That is the Bracero program. So it's spelled Brace and then R-O. Bracero. This is a conference. So this is our third conference. Remember I told you there's going to be three. This is the third conference that was held in Morocco. And it said that we would only take unconditional surrender. And that is the Casablanca Conference. Here's how I remember that. Unconditional. Conditional starts with a C. Casablanca starts with a C. Okay, so if you can remember those, that's the correlation. So Casablanca was in Morocco. And then the last question asks you about the Supreme Court case that said that wartime internment of American citizens of Japanese descent was constitutional. That is Korematsu versus the United States. And again, you have to spell it. So it looks like Corey, Matt, Sue. Kore, so that's the Corey, then Matt, M-A-T, and then Sue, S-U, okay? So that's how you spell that. All right, that is everything. The essay question we're going to talk about in class, but it's basically how do we go from being neutral to being involved in 1941. So you have to go from the Neutrality Act to 1935, 36, and 37, all the way to Pearl Harbor. But we'll talk more about that in class, okay? All right, and then finally, I want to talk to you about the bonus question. I've been trying to remember which one that I picked in times before, and I just could not think of it. So let me do, let's make it this question. Oh, but that's too easy. I'm trying to think of a really hard question. Okay, let's just do, I guess we'll just do the easy one. But I hate to do it too easy because then everybody will know. Oh, no, let's do this. Know the 5 beaches of D-Day. Okay, so if you'll know the 5, I'll actually do 5 bonus points if you can name all 5 of them. Okay, so it's 1 point for each one. So the 5 beaches are, there's Omaha and Utah. Those are the 2 U.S. ones. There is Gold and Sword. Those are the 2 British ones. And then Juneau is the Canadian one. Okay, so if you know all 5, you get up to 5 bonus points. All right, that's it. Again, I am really sorry that we didn't have the after school study session. You got robbed out of some pizza. But it just is what it is. I just wasn't feeling good at all. And I wouldn't have done a good job at a study session anyway. So, all right. Well, good luck on the test. I know you'll do well. And I will see you in class. All right.